Why am I so short? Can you see that? Yeah, you can. What? My lotion. Hello. How are you? Today I have a book haul. I have a very large book haul because I have an issue. Yeah, I do. These books in this haul I have collected over the past 2 months. So since my birthday, which was July 30th, where I hauled a lot of books. Have I finished them yet? No, we're not surprised. In that time, since July 30th till now, I have purchased some fun things, and I'm really excited about them, and I feel only mildly stressed about it. The exorbitant collection that I have kind of going on behind me. All of these are classics. All of these are classics. We'll start there. I have a small pile on my desk that I pulled off of these shelves. These first 3 books, the majority of these books actually are Oxford World Classics and Penguin Classics because they are the joy of my life. I love them so much. They're beautiful. I love seeing them on my shelves. Yes, so this first selection of 3 here, these are all pretty ancient classics. I'd previously heard of them in passing, like the name sounded familiar, but the title of the book sounded familiar, but I didn't fully know what they were about. I read the description and I felt like I would die if I didn't have them. Naturally. So the first one we have here is The Tale of Sinew. I could be pronouncing that totally wrong, but this is a masterpiece of ancient Egyptian poetry. So this is essentially, from what I recall, about a man leaving his home state or his hometown essentially to go off into the world and try to find meaning in the world, which is it's just so fascinating to me to read anything, and I say this all the time, but to read anything from any different time period or any different place in the world, just to realize that we're all dealing with the same shit and we're all trying to find the same things out of life, and no one ever really finds the answers, really. We just find peace in the non-answers, essentially. That's the secret of life, in case you're wondering. Except that there are no answers. So this was written in between 1940 and 1640 BC. So I'm excited to jump into this. I'm assuming it was translated. So the language will be easier to digest just by nature of translation, but I'm not sure. So this might be a slow go. Probably. To really get everything out of it, it probably will be. And then we have the I'm not going to pronounce this right. The Nibelungenlied. The Lay of the Nibelungs. All right, we're going to go with that. So these are the greatest of heroic epics to emerge from medieval Germany. It's a revenge saga of sweeping dimensions, of a dragon slayer and a mysterious kingdom, a priceless treasure hoard guarded by dwarves and giants, and the Amazonian queen, fortune-telling water sprites, and a cloak of invisibility. Holy shit, this is making me really pumped. Okay, driven by the conflict between someone, I can't pronounce that name, the innocent maiden turned she-devil, and her antagonist, the stoic, indomitable Hagen, the story is one of human tragedy, of love, jealousy, murder, and revenge, ending in slaughter on a horrific scale, the work of an anonymous poet. Oh my gosh. It's a national epic of the Germans. I love German literature. I've noticed that what I've read from Germany, translated from the German, I've really loved. But doesn't that sound really good? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. This has been sitting on my shelves for like 2 months now, and I forgot that that's what it was about, and now my passion is revived, so there you go. And then we have the Mabinogion, which is Celtic mythology, Arthurian romance, and an intriguing interpretation of British history. Welsh medieval masterpiece, Gwydion the shapeshifter who can create a woman out of flowers, Math the magician whose feet must lie upon the lap of a virgin, the hanging pregnant mouse and hunting a magical boar, dragons, witches, and giants, kings and heroes, honor and revenge, love, and a country struggling to retain its independence. Oh my gosh. I love how modern fantasy is so inspired by these medieval type ideals and these medieval literary tropes. You see them in modern fantasy, and I just really love that. Probably totally inspired by Tolkien, you know, because he was very much so inspired by medieval culture. And also I noticed that the Silmarillion reads a lot like the Book of Genesis. Is that how is, I mean, I don't know, was that the intention? I'm not sure, but it reads a lot like the Bible. So I just find that really interesting. I'm really excited to read these, basically. And then we have some Ralph Waldo Emerson Nature and Selected Essays, which I purchased because I read Mary Oliver's Upstream, and she talked about this in there. These are his own personal philosophies. Let's see. Showed Americans how to be the creators of their own circumstances, harmony rather than the domestication of nature, and for reliance on individual integrity rather than on materialistic institutions. I love that. I love that so much, and I'm assuming he'll be writing a little bit about theology and nature, and I love reading people's ideas kind of centered around those themes. Anyway, and then we have some more. We have 3 Penguin classics. So we have Poor Folk and Other Stories by Dostoevsky, which I believe these were Poor Folk, and I think these are his earlier stories. I know that Poor Folk was written in 1846, and he was sentenced to death, but then saved from death, basically, and sent to a prison camp, essentially. In 1849, I think, because of his involvement in like anti-government stuff. So these are his earlier stories, I believe, which I think would be really interesting. I haven't really dived too much into Dostoevsky, but I own a couple of his works, and I think it would be really interesting to see his thoughts as a human prior to those life-changing circumstances that he found himself in. So we have, oh my gosh, I hit myself in the eyebrow. Alrighty. Okay, and then we have The Lady of the Camellias by Alexander Dumas, which is what Moulin Rouge. So this is what Moulin Rouge is based on. This inspired Moulin Rouge. How fascinating. I think Henry James also said that this is one of the greatest love stories of all time, I believe. So this is French, and I believe this is 18th century French. 19th century French. Yeah, 19th century. Cool. I'm very excited. I love The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas, and I really want to read The Count of Monte Cristo. So I'm excited to get to this. This is also a lot shorter than those other 2 works, so there you go. And then we have, I got really excited because a lot of people Victober is coming up. So I've been watching lots of old Victober TBRs or new Victober TBRs, or wrap-ups and what have you. And I decided, inspired by that and watching those videos, I decided to buy Shirley by Charlotte Bronte. I don't really have too much to say about this. I don't fully know what this is about, and based off, from what I remember why I bought it, was I think this is supposed to be a really nice story, I think was Charlotte Bronte's intention. A nice story about friendship and romance, I believe. So we follow 4 young people, and I believe there's a bit of a complicated love square going on. And this is set in Victorian times, obviously. Written by Charlotte Bronte, so she obviously wrote Jane Eyre. Love Emily Bronte, but I like Charlotte Bronte. I'd love to reread Jane Eyre, but I'm excited to get to Shirley. And yeah, this was published in 1849. Cool. And I love this cover. I really do love this cover. I love paintings of like young women that are just kind of staring off, and they're wearing either opulent clothing or just really just whatever. I feel like I love to see what facial expressions were painted. I think it really says a lot about the constraints of female lives and how they are. Sometimes you so often see like the pain on their faces, or the submission, or the resigned looks on their faces. I'll try to insert one of my favorite paintings of all time in the screen. So yes. And then we have Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Okay, so I have a really complicated relationship with this man, okay? I wanted to love you so many times, and you let me down so many times, and it's incredibly frustrating, Mr. John Steinbeck, but I'm giving you one last chance, and if you fail me, that's it. You're done. I'm cutting you off. I've read Grapes of Wrath, I've read To a God Unknown. I'm looking at my shelves to see if I can read the title, which for all intents and purposes should have been my favorite thing ever, because he writes like about the landscape, the California landscape, relationships and connections, and he's a beautiful prose writer, first of all, and there's lots of religious themes in his works, and I love religious themes in works. And I just haven't been struck by John Steinbeck yet. I feel like I haven't connected to any of his characters, and I don't feel embedded into his story as a reader. So I'm really hoping I love this. I was supposed to read this in high school. Did I? Obviously not. I did not. So I bought it now because it's like Of Mice and Men, you know what I mean? And then we have, I love these editions as well. These are my favorite editions to read from. These are the Penguin English Library editions. I don't always love them aesthetically, but these are my favorite to read from because they're floppy. I love how the font, love you. And I actually really like how there's no introduction and there's not too many notes in these editions, because I feel like I'm being presented these works as they were presented at the time they were being written. So I can just kind of take them for what they are and have my own emotional reaction to them, as opposed to reading an essay about it first and then that colors my experience of it, and that sometimes changes my opinion and lessens my enjoyment. Sometimes it enhances my enjoyment, but you know how it goes. But yeah, this is The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, and this is by Lawrence Sterne, and this is an Irish satire from the 18th century, and this is basically following, from what I understand, this man from the point of conception to death. And that's what I know. It's supposed to be a masterpiece, and it's Irish, and it's a satire. And that's all I really need to know, because I'm Irish as shit, and I love anything Irish. I love Irish literature, and I love satires. I'm here for it. I hope I love this. There's that. We have a beautiful little stack going on here. And then a book of poetry. So this is translated from the German, and this is Rilke's The Book of Hours, Love Poems to God. And I picked this up because of Emmy Reads, or because of Emma from the channel Emmy. You all know who I'm talking about. This is one of her favorite books, and I just really wanted to read it. I have yet to read any Rilke. I own Letters to a Young Poet, and I own his novel, which is somewhere on my shelves. I just haven't read it yet, but I want to read his poetry because that's what he's known for. He's a poet. I read one of them and I loved it right here. So let's read it to you. So this is on page 165. No one lives his life disguised since childhood, haphazardly assembled from voices and fears and little pleasures. We come of age as masks. Our true face never speaks. Somewhere there must be storehouses where all these lives are laid away, like suits of armor, or old carriages, or clothes hanging limply on the walls. Maybe all paths lead there, to the repository of unlived things. So yeah, I'm really excited to read some more of that. I feel like it could be very spiritually enriching and moving. Oh my goodness. So we have this stack here. Look at how beautiful. Oh, I love those vintage red spines so much. So first of all, I did read, I don't have it in front of me, but I did read a Little Black Classics collection of Chekhov's short stories. It had 3 of his short stories in it. It was called A Nervous Breakdown, and I loved it. I really freaking loved it. I love realist short stories, so I love realism in literature. I also like magical realism, but I love realism in literature, and that's what he writes, realist short stories. So he's Russian, obviously, and I bought 2 collections of his works because I believe Penguin publishes 3 volumes of his collected short stories. I think I have the second and the third one. I could be mistaken, but these are from 1892 to 1895, 1896 to 1904. So there's Ward Number 6 and Other Stories, which I know is one of his most popular stories, and then there's The Lady with the Little Dog. I bought 2 volumes instead of just 1 because I really wanted to read Ward Number 6 and I really wanted to read The Lady with the Little Dog, so both of these titular short stories. I thought, no big deal. I'm a book collector. I'll buy both. I'm not sad about it. I'm not mad. This is great. Great excuse. Thanks, Penguin. And then we have 4 of these glorious vintage classics editions. There's nothing like a cherry red spine sitting on the shelf. Oh, beautiful. So we have 3 Richard Yates. I have yet to read Richard Yates. Why did I ball out and buy 3? Because that's who I am as a human, and that's what we did. And I'm obsessed with these covers. Let me just look at you. Oh, beautiful. Obsessed with these covers. Oh my goodness. Let me tell you what I got first, actually. So, Disturbing the Peace, which is about a successful salesman in his mid-30s, John Wilder. And he has a wife and a son, and he has an idyllic life, and he's achieved the American dream, essentially. And he basically pieces out one day and leaves his life and his wife and child. For some reason, I'm sure I will find out when I read this. And he has a bunch of affairs, he drinks too much, or he has a bunch of affairs, he drinks too much, and then one night he snaps and is like, peace out, to his wife. And he's like, I'm done. I find there's a really similar parallel. There's a fine line that's really fascinating to me between Romanticism, like the Romantic movement in literature, and American literature. And it's that place that rests between those two things is fascinating to me, because obviously the American dream is a romantic ideal. I mean, it's entirely a romantic ideal that is... it doesn't exist. It's an idea that can't exist. I find that in American literature, there's you're down and out because you're really disappointed with the inevitability that your life can't be what you romanticize life to be, and what this ideal that the American dream advertises is not real. And so it leads to disillusionment and disappointment. So I find that American literature is steeped in disillusionment. And you can feel the grime on the sidewalks in lots of American prose, and I love it. I just fucking love it, man. That line right there, just yes, I'm a big fan. And then we have A Good School by Richard Yates. Oh, you're fucking joking? There's a sticker. Okay, ooh, that came off beautifully. Okay, I'm not mad anymore. You're fine. Live your best life sticker. Okay. Which is about a boarding school. We follow a couple people. And I think this is after the Second World War. So it's about how disillusionment of life after the Second World War, essentially. So still an idealized life is being advertised. Right? You go to this boarding school, you're supposed to be this kind of way, and then life around you is falling apart. Essentially, the world is falling apart. Societies and structures are falling apart. And how do we deal with these things as humans? Yeah, Pearl Harbor, and suddenly they are faced with larger issues than the day-to-day problems and politics of school life. So I'm really excited to get to this. I actually ordered this from Waterstones, which was expensive, but I wanted it. Love yourself, okay? Live, laugh, love yourself. All right, and then we have Revolutionary Road, because I think this is his most famous work, if I'm not mistaken, and it's about a marriage. They're both actors. It's about their marriage kind of crumbling and falling apart. And there's a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, and I started watching it, and it was amazing, and then I was like, oh my god, no, I have to read the book. I have to read the book first, so... Now I have the book, and look at how beautiful that cover is. Great. And then last vintage red spine, okay, vintage classic, is not by Richard Yates. We have The Leopard by Tommaso di Lampedusa, I'm just going to say his last name. I think this is studied a lot in Italian schools. And this is supposed to be, in the spring of 1860, Fabrizio, the charismatic Prince of Salina, still rules over thousands of acres and hundreds of people, including his own numerous family, in mingled splendor and squalor. Then comes Garibaldi's landing in Sicily, and the prince must decide whether to resist the forces of change or come to terms with them. I'm excited to get to this. I'm intrigued. This is something that I'd be interested in studying because I love Italian literature, or I'm coming to learn that I love Italian literature. I haven't read too much, but I find there's a deep earthiness to Italian literature, and they don't shy away from the sensual, and I really love and appreciate that. It helps you get in touch with your own earthiness and sensuality. I'm looking at myself in the mirror. Yes. And then we have one of my favorite writers of all time, George Eliot. Oh! I love you. I love you, George Eliot. I think these are 2 short stories. So The Lifted Veil and Brother Jacob. Yeah, so 2 short stories, which is supposed to be her most philosophical of works and supposed to be, I think, her most, I'm not even going to say her most mature of works, but I think I read that somewhere, which is really saying something because it's George freaking Eliot. She wrote Middlemarch. I don't know what else to say about that. The Lifted Veil, it's a dark fantasy, contemporary scientific interest in psychology of the brain, mesmerism, phrenology, and experiments in revivification. Try saying that 10 times fast. Revivification. Yeah, I can't do it. Narrated by an egocentric, morbid young clairvoyant whose fascination for Bertha Grant lies partly in her obliquity. The story is an exploration of fiction's ability to offer the insight into the self. Brother Jacob. It's a satirical modern fable. The relationship between art and lying. Holy cow. Very excited. Again, it's gonna be Victober, so very excited about that. So we have Oscar Wilde's De Profundis and Other Prison Writings. So Oscar Wilde, I saw some excerpts of this on Instagram and I died inside a little bit. Okay, I died inside a little bit when I read them and I immediately went on to Amazon and I was like, sorry, I can't respond to what you're saying right now. Someone's trying to talk to me. I need to buy this book on Amazon. I'll talk to you in a sec. So that's what I did. So Oscar Wilde wrote The Picture of Dorian Gray. You don't need me to tell you that he is a beautiful writer. And I think this is supposed to be primarily about his philosophies on life. Epistolic account of Oscar Wilde's spiritual journey while in prison. Describes his conversion from his previous belief in pleasure and decadence to his new shocking conviction that the supreme vice is shallowness. That reminds me of St. Augustine. Kind of. And then we have another George Eliot, because it had to be done. Adam Bede. And I don't fully know what this one is about. I don't really care to know exactly what this is about. It's George Eliot. And I will read anything she has written. Ever. And I will cry, and I will love it, and I will feel spiritually moved. And it'll be amazing. I just know it. So Adam Bede, there you go. And then we have some Virginia Woolf, because Virginia Woolf is another one of my favorite writers. So we have 3 things by Virginia Woolf. I bought a lot of books, okay? I bought a lot of books. We have A Little Black Classic, which is Flush, which is a short story that I think she wrote about Elizabeth Barrett Browning and her relationship with her Cocker Spaniel. So it's like her dog narrating her romance. I think. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure. And then we have another vintage classic. We have The Waves, which is supposed to be Virginia Woolf's most stream of consciousness, which is saying something, and her most psychological work, maybe her most mature work, I believe I've heard people say before as well, which again is saying something. Again, I don't fully know exactly what this is about. 6 children playing in a garden. And it follows their lives as they experience friendship and love. I'm here for it. Essays. So selected essays by Virginia Woolf. I've been really interested in reading lots of her literary criticisms. I believe she writes a lot about the Brontes. And I'm really interested to hear her opinions on other great works of literature and writing advice or her thoughts. So that's Virginia Woolf. Edith Wharton's Ethan Frome. I needed this and I couldn't wait to buy it. But apparently I can wait to freaking read it because, oh my gosh, how amazing would it be if you could just like, done. And I could just get through like 1,000,000 books. But that would also take away the joy of it because the act of reading is beautiful. Okay, anyway, I'm just going to read the back, okay? Ethan Frome works his unproductive farm and struggles to maintain a bearable existence with his difficult, suspicious, and hypochondriac wife, Zena. But when Zena's vivacious cousin enters their household as a hired girl, Ethan finds himself obsessed with her and with the possibilities for happiness she comes to represent. Drama. I needed it. I needed it. Icelandic sagas. So we have the Saga of King Hrolf Kraki. I'm not going to pronounce these correctly. I just wanted to try some Icelandic sagas, fantastical events that were said to have occurred in 5th century Denmark. This tells of the exploits of King Hrolf and his famous champions, the Bear Warrior. Inspired by the same legendary heritage as Beowulf. I love Beowulf, so I just wanted to try some Icelandic sagas, so we got that. And then I got, which was written actually by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who's a poet, is the Saga of King Olaf, which I thought was cute. This is like $2, so I needed it. And it's an epic, or it's a verse narrative of the Saga of King Olaf, which is pretty cool. What else did I get? I also got the Poetic Edda, or the Poetic Edda, I think it's Edda, translated by Carolyn Larrington. So the Greeks have the Metamorphosis by Ovid, and then the Icelandic narratives, what is it called? Norse mythology is the Poetic Edda. And I believe this was written during the time that, I could be mistaken, but if I recall correctly, this was written during the time that the Norse religion and culture were kind of being overshadowed and essentially kind of wiped out a little bit by Christian religion and culture, and someone wanted to write all these stories down so that they weren't forgotten or lost. We have Vera Britton's Testament of Youth, which is a diary written in 1915. So Vera Britton, she was a nurse during the First World War, and this is her writing about she lost every man in her life. So I think all of her brothers and her dad, and it was about her being a nurse and dealing with loss. And I'm scared, but really excited to read this. So this was her diary or her journals. Did I need to buy this now? No, but at some point in my life I would like to read this. So here we are. So I have St. Augustine's City of God, which was written after the fall of the Roman Empire. Written as an eloquent defense of the faith at a time when the Roman Empire was on the brink of collapse. It examines the ancient pagan religions of Rome, the arguments of the Greek philosophers, and the revelations of the Bible, pointing the way forward to a citizenship that transcends worldly politics and will last for eternity. I'm very excited to get to this when I get to this, or to pick through it. I'm sure I'll pick through it randomly at times, and then really highlight things and probably watch some documentaries and people talking about this stuff as I go through it. So this is just something that will probably be a companion for a large period of my life, or my life essentially. I'm upset with myself that I have this many books to talk about right now, okay? We have The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. I read Clara and the Sun and I actually didn't love it. And he's someone that I want to love. And I feel like The Remains of the Day is the book I'm most drawn to of his works. I know Never Let Me Go is the most popular, but this is the one I'm most drawn to. And this is a portrait of a man who is a butler, I think during the Second World War, an English butler, and of his fading insular world in post-war England, okay? At the end of his 3 decades of service at Darlington Hall, Stevens embarks on a country drive during which he looks back over his career to reassure himself that he has served humanity by serving a great gentleman. So I think perhaps, this is what I'm telling myself in my head, it's kind of probing at meaning that we ascribe to our lives and feeling like maybe what we find to be important about ourselves and something that we live for, that we want to be important, reassuring ourselves, like it says on the back, that our life meant something and that we weren't pointless. Alrighty, and then we have some Calvino, which I'm so excited to read because I feel like he writes very in a very childlike voice from what I've heard, and he writes a lot of childlike fables, but he's writing for adults. These are technically classified as adult works of classical literature, but he has a childlike tone, which I love. Let's all try to get back to that youthfulness within ourselves. That is purity. That is love. Yes. So we have The Cloven Viscount, which I don't remember what these are about. The separate halves of a nobleman go on to pursue their own independent adventures. In a battle against the Turks, Viscount Medardo of Turalba is bisected lengthwise by a cannonball. One half of him returns to his feudal estate and takes up a lavishly evil life. Soon the other virtuous half appears. When the two halves become rivals for the love of the same woman, wow, I'm glad I bought this. There's no telling the lengths each will go to win. What? Wow, I'm excited to read that. And then we have The Baron in the Trees, which is about a man who goes and lives his whole life up in the trees, and he's viewing the world and society kind of progress through this outside bird's eye view. And it's him thinking about life, I'm assuming. And then one of my favorite writers of all time, like I was saying, I love German literature. We have Goethe. So this is Goethe's Elective Affinities. The Sorrows of Young Werther, I think is how you pronounce it. But The Sorrows of Young Werther is one of my favorite books of all time. Top 4, 3, 2, 1, no. Top 5, somewhere up there. I need to read more of his works. And this is Elective Affinities, which is a penetrating study of marriage and passion. The study of the lives of people who are living badly. He questions free will. Ooh, excited. Love Goethe. Okay, there we go. So we have Guy de Maupassant's Like Death, which I believe is supposed to be a sensual kind of love story. This is in an NYRB edition. I did read A Life by Guy de Maupassant, which I liked. I didn't love, but I saw a review of this online and I just felt like I needed it, or I would die. I would perish in that moment. So he's an artist. It's about his love affair. It's French. It's going to be very sensual and dramatic, and we can vibe with that. We know it. We can vibe with that. All right, and then we have the Bhagavad Gita, and I'm really excited to read this because this is more Eastern philosophies and ideals, and I find that to be entirely peaceful and actually really helpful to repeat these wisdoms to yourself in real life. I find it to be very comforting and grounding. I don't have too much else to say about this. I'm just excited to read it. So, intensely spiritual work that forms the cornerstone of the Hindu faith and is one of the masterpieces of Sanskrit poetry. The beginning of a mighty battle between the Pandava and Kaurava armies, the god Krishna gives spiritual enlightenment to the warrior Arjuna, who realizes that the true battle is for his own soul. Love. Ivan Turgenev's First Love, which of course is Russian. This is about a young man who's sitting around shooting the shit with a bunch of his pals, and they're talking about, or they're telling stories of their experiences with first love. And this dude's like, bitches, I got a story that'll beat you all, I promise. And he tells his story of first love, which is supposed to be kind of weird and dark and scandalous from what I hear. And it's short and I'm really excited to read this. And then we have, which is German, so translated from the German, it's Effie Briest by Theodor Fontaine, and I believe this is supposed to be another story about young love, the trials that they face, maybe they can't be together or something. So unworldly young Effie Briest is married off to Baron von Innstetten, an austere and ambitious civil servant twice her age. That's gross, man. That's a gross thing in our history, I have to say. Like, they're marrying off young-ass girls. I said ask. I mean ass. That was censored, okay? Young-ass girls to some not young-ass men. That's creepy AF, okay? Who has little time for his new wife. Isolated and bored, Effie finds comfort and distraction in a brief liaison with Major Krampus, a married man with a dangerous reputation. Beautiful. And then drama will ensue, I know it. And then we have The Travels by Marco Polo, which still has the receipt, but this was in the philosophy section of the bookstore. Marco Polo's voyages, which began in 1271 with a visit to China and a bunch of diplomatic missions and him seeing the world and his thoughts and philosophies on life in different cultures, and I find that to be entirely intriguing. And then we have 3 books left. I promise, man. I promise. So we have Plays by Anton Chekhov, which I probably should have mentioned when I brought up the short stories, but they weren't next to each other on the shelf, so here we are. So I wanted to read his plays because people rave about his plays. I think Saoirse Ronan starred in a movie adaptation of The Seagull, am I correct? Which is one of Chekhov's plays. And I believe Uncle Vanya, I hear people talk about Uncle Vanya all the time, and the quote on the back of this is, "You must know why you are alive, or else everything is nonsense, just blowing in the wind." Beautiful. So this has Ivanov, the Seagull, Uncle Vanya, 3 Sisters, and the Cherry Orchard. So I'm very excited to jump into this. I really find there's something so just the passion in Russian literature and the torment. And I feel like the essence of Russian literature, it really delves deep into the human spirit, into the suffering of the human spirit. And I really appreciate it, love it, appreciate it. And I need to get more into Russian literature. And then we have more George Eliot, which are selected essays, poems, and other writings. Nothing much to say about this other than I freaking love George Eliot. I would like to get to know her more as an individual and read her nonfiction. So there you go. Again, a great selection potentially for Victober. And then last but not least, man, look at all these beautiful books. Just drowning in a pile of books. Hello, I love you. Thanks for coming to join the party on the shelves. Okay. So last but not least, we have The Letters of Vincent van Gogh. And I want to read this and I wanted to buy this because the life of an artist that is not recognized in their lifetime. They really only achieve fame and status once they pass away. And what that must be like to feel or know, hopefully he knows, maybe at times he has doubts, that you are brilliant and a genius, but that no one recognizes it or sees that with you. The torment that you must live with, or what that must do to your psychological state, will be entirely fascinating to read. So that's, I think, what this is about, or about his life. I think he had a really moving relationship with his brother, and I'm assuming that'll be in this as well, so we'll get to know him a bit more as a person, and I'm excited about it. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them. I would love to know, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Much love. Why do I do peace signs all the time? This is not something I do in daily life. It's just when the camera's on. This is me being awkward. Okay, bye.